On the last Tuesday of May, when the sun hung over the playground like a white-hot coin nailed to the sky, no one imagined that a bottle of sunscreen would become Exhibit A in a courtroom. The children of Maple Grove Elementary had been released for recess with the wild relief that only the nearly summer air can bring. The asphalt shimmered, the metal slides glowed, and the scent of cut grass drifted over the blacktop. Inside room 12, however, third-grade teacher Elena Ramirez paused before following her students outside. She glanced at the weather alert on her phone UV index extreme and then at the class list clipped to her clipboard. She had asked parents at the start of the year to send hats, to send water bottles, to remember sunscreen. Some did. Some forgot. And some, she knew, were juggling so much that a forgotten bottle of lotion hardly registered in the hierarchy of daily survival. The playground erupted into motion the moment the doors swung open. Children scattered like bright marbles across the yard, chasing soccer balls, climbing ladders, arguing over whose turn it was on the swings. Elena stationed herself near the benches, her usual post, scanning faces for signs of trouble. That was when she noticed Liam Carter near the fence, standing oddly still amid the chaos. He was a small boy with pale skin and a constellation of freckles that seemed to multiply in sunlight. He squinted up at the sky as if daring it to blink first. When she walked over, she saw that the back of his neck was already flushed a deep, warning pink. "Did you put on sunscreen this morning?" she asked gently. He shrugged. Mom was late. She crouched beside him. The heat radiating from his skin felt unnatural, like a stovetop left on. "Does it hurt?" "A little," he admitted, scratching at his shoulder. Elena felt the familiar tug between policy and instinct. The district handbook was clear. Teachers were not to administer medication of any kind without written authorization. Sunscreen, technically, fell under that umbrella. At orientation, a slide presentation had devoted nearly 10 minutes to the liability risks of well-meaning staff. But there was no nurse on the playground, and the nurse's office was locked during lunch. The nearest patch of shade was already crowded with children. She imagined Liam's skin blistering by the end of recess. She imagined explaining later why she had done nothing. In her tote bag, she carried a small travel-sized bottle of sunscreen she kept for herself. She hesitated only a second longer before squeezing a careful line into her palm. "I'm going to put a little on your neck and shoulders, okay?" she said. "Just to keep you from burning." He nodded, relieved. She applied it lightly, making sure not to touch his face, working quickly, efficiently, as though speed could erase impropriety. When she finished, she told him to play in the shade for the rest of recess. He ran off, already laughing, the crisis apparently averted. Elena wiped her hands on a tissue and told herself that common sense was not a crime. By the end of the day, she had nearly forgotten about it. It resurfaced only when Liam's mother, Rebecca Carter, appeared in the doorway after dismissal, her expression tight and unreadable. She was impeccably dressed, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that did not move when she turned her head. "Miss Ramirez," she said, voice cool. "Liam mentioned you applied something to his skin today." Elena felt a prickle of unease. "Just a bit of sunscreen." He was starting to burn. Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. "Without my permission?" "There wasn't time to call," Elena replied carefully. "It was extremely hot and he was uncomfortable." You thought you could override a parent's authority?" Rebecca cut in. "Do you have any idea what could have been in that bottle? What if he had an allergic reaction?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. She had checked the ingredients. It was a common brand, hypoallergenic, but the word unauthorized echoed in her mind. "I'm sorry if this upset you," she said. "My only intention was to protect him." Rebecca did not respond. She turned, took Liam's hand, and left without another word. The next morning, Elena was summoned to the principal's office. Principal Howard sat behind his desk, fingers steepled. The district handbook opened before him like scripture. "Elena," he began, "I've received a complaint from Mrs. Carter. She's alleging that you administered a medical substance to her child without consent." "It was sunscreen," Elena said, incredulous. "He was burning." Howard sighed. "I understand. But policy is policy. Parents must provide written authorization for any topical application. So we're supposed to let them get hurt?" she asked, heat rising in her own cheeks now. "We're supposed to follow procedures," he replied. "I'll need to file an incident report. For now, consider this a formal warning." A warning might have been the end of it, had Rebecca Carter not been a paralegal at a prominent law firm. Within a week, the district received notice of intent to sue for battery and emotional distress. The language was clinical and devastating: unauthorized contact, violation of bodily autonomy, reckless disregard for parental rights. The complaint argued that even benign substances could cause harm and that the school had failed to train its staff adequately in respecting medical boundaries. News of the lawsuit spread quickly, first through whispers in the teacher's lounge, then across social media, and finally onto local news broadcasts, hungry for controversy. Teachers sued for unauthorized medical aid, the headlines read, as if Elena had performed an illicit surgery on the jungle gym. Photographs of the playground accompanied the articles. Sun glaring off empty swings, the image almost accusatory. Comment sections ignited with debate. Some called her a hero. Others called her reckless. Strangers dissected her judgment from behind glowing screens. At home, Elena sat at her kitchen table long after midnight. The lawsuit papers spread before her like a foreign language she was expected to translate. She had become a teacher because she believed in small mercies: tying shoelaces, offering extra pencils, kneeling to eye level when a child cried. The idea that such gestures could be weaponized against her felt surreal. Her sister urged her to countersue. Her father, a retired mechanic, shook his head and muttered that the world had lost its mind. Elena felt only a heavy confusion. Had she truly crossed a line, or had the line shifted without her noticing? The district's legal team advised her to say nothing publicly. "This will likely settle," they assured her. "It's about precedent." But for Elena, it was about Liam's pink neck and the way he had flinched under the sun. She replayed the moment again and again, searching for arrogance in her decision. All she found was urgency. She had not considered herself a hero. She had simply been the only adult within arm's reach. The Carters, meanwhile, stood firm. Rebecca gave a brief statement outside the courthouse, her voice steady. "This is not about sunscreen," she said. "It's about consent and parental rights. No teacher has the authority to make medical decisions for my child without my knowledge." Behind her, Liam shifted uncomfortably, his freckles faint under a cloudy sky that seemed almost ironic. The image circulated widely, fueling both sympathy and scorn. As summer deepened, the case moved forward. Depositions were taken. Elena sat in a sterile conference room while attorneys asked her to recount the event in excruciating detail. "At precisely what time did you apply the lotion?" one lawyer asked. "Approximately 12:47 p.m., she answered, glancing at her memory like a clock. "How much did you use?" "A small amount. Enough to cover his neck and shoulders." "Did you consider contacting the parent first?" "There wasn't time," she said, her voice tightening. "Recess is 20 minutes. Sunburn doesn't wait." Each question felt like a subtle accusation that kindness required prior approval. She wondered how many forms a teacher would need to sign before offering a bandage or a hug. The trial began in early autumn, when the leaves outside the courthouse turned the same red as the photographs of Liam's neck entered into evidence. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. Jurors filed in, ordinary citizens tasked with defining the boundary between care and control. Elena sat beside the district's attorney, hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Rebecca Carter maintained her composed posture, though dark circles traced the edges of her eyes. The prosecution argued that allowing teachers to administer substances without consent opened the door to unpredictable risks. They presented hypothetical scenarios: allergic reactions, religious objections, undisclosed medical conditions. "Where does it stop?" the attorney asked the jury. "If sunscreen is permissible, what about antibiotic cream, pain relievers, injections?" The implication was clear: a slippery slope greased with good intentions. The defense countered with photographs of the UV index that day, expert testimony about the dangers of sun exposure, and statements from other parents who expressed gratitude for Elena's vigilance. One mother testified that her daughter had once fainted from heat, and that she wished more teachers acted decisively. "We trust them with our children for 7 hours a day," she said. "We can trust them with sunscreen." When Elena took the stand, the courtroom quieted. She described the heat, Liam's discomfort, the absence of the nurse. "What was your intention?" her attorney asked. "To prevent harm," she replied simply. "Did you intend to undermine the parent?" "Never." Under cross-examination, she was asked whether she was aware of district policy. "Yes," she admitted. "The policies are written for typical situations." "This didn't feel typical, and you decided you knew better than the rules?" The prosecutor pressed. I decided that a child's burning skin mattered more in that moment, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Outside the courtroom, public opinion continued to sway like a pendulum. Talk radio hosts debated the erosion of common sense. Parenting blogs dissected the concept of bodily autonomy. Some teachers confessed online that they would hesitate next time, that fear of litigation might paralyze them. Elena read these comments with a sinking heart. If her choice had consequences beyond her own career, what would that mean for the next child standing under a merciless sun? Liam, for his part, seemed bewildered by the attention. In a rare moment away from cameras, he told a reporter that the sunscreen had smelled like coconuts and that it had stopped his neck from hurting. He did not understand why adults were angry. His words, though simple, circulated widely and softened some of the harsher narratives. Still, the legal machinery ground on, indifferent to coconut-scented innocence. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated. Elena waited in a small room with peeling paint, listening to the muted hum of courthouse activity beyond the door. She thought about the first day she had stepped into her classroom, about the bulletin boards she had decorated with paper suns and motivational quotes. She had believed then that education was a partnership between school and home, a shared commitment to nurturing children. Now that partnership felt fractured, reduced to clauses and counterclaims. When the jury returned, the courtroom rose. The foreperson, a middle-aged man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, cleared his throat. On the charge of battery, they found in favor of the defendant. On the claim of emotional distress, they found insufficient evidence of harm. A collective exhale rippled through the room. Elena felt her knees weaken, relief flooding her like cool water after heat. The judge, however, added a measured coda. This case highlights the tension between well-intentioned action and established policy, she said. Schools and parents must communicate clearly to avoid such conflicts in the future. It was not a reprimand, but neither was it a celebration. It was a reminder that the line would remain thin and contested. Outside, reporters thrust microphones forward, but Elena declined to speak. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired. Rebecca Carter issued a brief statement expressing disappointment but reiterating her commitment to parental rights. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no handshake across the divide. Just two women who had looked at the same moment and seen different dangers. In the weeks that followed, the district revised its policies. New forms were sent home, allowing parents to grant blanket permission for sunscreen application. Bottles were added to classroom supply lists. A training session was held to clarify procedures during extreme weather. Elena attended, listening carefully, aware that her name hovered unspoken over every slide. She signed the updated guidelines with a mixture of gratitude and resignation. On the first unseasonably warm day of the next spring, she stood once more on the playground, the sun bright but not yet brutal. In her pocket, she carried the new authorization forms, signed and filed. When a student approached her, complaining of heat, she did not hesitate this time. She checked the list, confirmed permission, and applied sunscreen openly, almost ceremonially. Other teachers did the same. The act felt both ordinary and monumental. Elena understood now that the world she inhabited was one where even small kindnesses required documentation. Yet she also understood that fear could not be the guiding principle of her profession. She would continue to weigh policy against compassion, to navigate the narrow space between them. The lawsuit had not changed her belief that children deserved protection. It had only complicated the path toward providing it. Sometimes as she watched her students race across the yard, she thought about how easily the narrative could have hardened her. It would have been simple to retreat, to adopt a strict adherence to rules that absolved her of personal judgment. But she knew that education demanded more than compliance. It demanded presence, attentiveness, and occasionally courage in small forms. A bottle